Welcome to CommsVerse. This session is called Succeeding with Microsoft Teams in Mixed Technology Communications Environments with Dennis Lorist.
Thank you, Cara. So go ahead and start.
Yes, you're free to start.
Awesome. Okay, so as the title suggests, we're going to talk about some complex environments that customers are known to have with respect to their deployments and their journey towards moving to Microsoft Teams. So one of the big reasons there's really fast uptake or adoption of Microsoft Teams, at least that we've seen within PEXIP talking to our customers, is the outbreak of COVID-19. So a lot of organisations and institutions have sent their workers home, and they're left to their own devices in many scenarios. Their traditional tools that they have in the office, like their Cisco or Polycom life-size room-based systems, really are of no use when you're working from home. And accessing that technology from home can also be problematic. People need to VPN in to gain access to the network, or organisations need to increase their internet pipes to allow that. So I guess one of the tools that a lot of these customers have access to as part of the 365 subscription is Teams, obviously. So the opportunity for customers to use Teams straight away for when working from home was too good to turn down. So that's really, at least in our conversations, prevailed as the reason for the massive uptake. So people are now conducting their meetings using Microsoft Teams, video enabled, full content, just like we're doing now. But a lot of these IT administrators for these organisations are now starting to think about, what are we going to do when people return to the office? And typically there are huge investments that organisations have made in the past on video conferencing infrastructure and endpoint devices, room integrations, audio visual setups. So the organisations want to continue to make use of that. So we need interoperability to be able to have these expensive devices talk back into Microsoft Teams, so that users can now continue to use their Teams meetings as a base or a place to meet, but then use their high-end audio visual devices to connect when in the office. So that's pretty much what we do. We offer what we call cloud video interop. We're certified for Microsoft Teams and Skype for Business to provide this interoperability. And I guess the crux of it is really to solve that problem where you've got the video conferencing devices that need to join into the Teams meetings. We can also provide that functionality from Skype systems and from Skype for Business clients to be able to gateway or interop Skype participants through our platforms into Microsoft Teams. The second 2 points we'll talk about a little bit more in detail, but essentially we're able to honour the privacy policy of an organisation's Teams deployment, where we can deem the customer's endpoints as trusted devices, so that they're allowed directly into the meetings, bypassing the Teams lobby, just like a signed-in user within the tenancy. Now we can also provide customer domain hosting, and that'll become clear in the coming slides. So what we offer in terms of a solution for go-to-market to provide this interoperability is really two halves. One is a dedicated application. It's called PEXIP Infinity. It's really some workloads that can be installed within the customer's own environment, whether that's on physical tin under Hyper-V or VMware in their data centers, or in Microsoft Azure, or GCP or Amazon Web Services, or a combination of any of those. And it's quite elastic. It can be, the workloads can be distributed geographically or to suit a customer's network topology profile. So data center A and data center B, for example. It's highly customizable. We can brand basically everything on the platform, including any splash screens that you see from a video conferencing unit, to voiceovers, announcements, virtual receptions, etc. It can be completely branded. So that's the dedicated self-hosted application. Now, that can obviously take some time to deploy. So we have an option of a shared cloud service, which means all the stuff I just spoke about is already delivered and is already done. We deploy the CVI, or the Cloud Video Interop, within Microsoft Azure, and we do it in multiple regions to try and keep the media as close to the end user as possible, to avoid delay and potential loss. So we obviously have a whole bunch of support SLAs. The platform itself is elastic and scalable and expands and contracts based on load, and it's monitored 24/7 by our DevOps team. So on-premise or cloud. Now, what does it look like from a user's perspective? What do they need to do? Well, it's not really all that foreign to new users. So once it's enabled for the organisation or for individual users, all they need to do is book a Teams meeting, and they'll see that there's a new section down the bottom of the Teams invite that includes the interoperability information that users will need to know and to dial from video conferencing endpoints. So number 2 there is what I was mentioning before about the custom domain. So whether it's the self-hosted or the service, we can point the customer's domain service records for SIP and H323 to the platform, so that when someone dials teams at vc.company.com, you land on the interop service. Then you'll be asked to enter the Teams conference ID, which is number 3. Now, for slightly more advanced options or dialing methodologies, there's an alternate dialing link that takes you through to a page that describes further what you can do and how you can dial. So you can copy that number at domain into a SIP or 323 client and dial that. Or if you want to dial from Skype for Business, we have a little button here that allows you to click to join, and that will open up Skype and place the call for you. So we try to keep that as simple as possible. Now, for the customers that have Polycom or Cisco endpoints, we provide the ability to push out a calendar entry to the endpoint. So in this example, same Teams meeting, I add the room resource that's associated with this Cisco endpoint and add that to the Teams meeting. Now, we have software that sort of sits in between Exchange, whether it's Exchange Online or Exchange Server on premise, and monitors the room resource mailboxes and works out what type of meeting the room has been invited to. We look at the headers and the body of the invite, and here we work out that that number, the conference ID at vc.company.com, needs to be behind that green join button at position number 2 there. So what this does is greatly simplifies the join experience from the perspective of the room, of the user that wants to connect from a Cisco or a Polycom endpoint. They just walk in at the desired time, click the join button, and it routes the call through our service or the self-hosted platform into the Teams meeting. Now, we can match more than just Teams. We can also match Skype. The endpoints that we support are the current Cisco endpoints and the Poly endpoints. They actually work in different ways. So for Cisco, they like to be pushed a calendar entry to the actual device, whereas the Polycom endpoints, they pull a calendar entry from Exchange Web Services. So we effectively sit in the middle between Exchange and the endpoints and deliver that functionality. We can support it for Exchange on-premise and Exchange Online or 365. And as I mentioned, works out of the box with Microsoft Teams. But some organizations also want to cater for other types of meetings. So while this works perfectly for Teams, we also have a virtual meeting room platform on PEXIP, so we can match those meetings and put the correct URI behind that green join button. Same for Hangouts Meets with Skype for Business, either on-prem or 365, Cisco WebEx, BlueJeans meetings, and Zoom meetings. That's just a list of the out-of-the-box meetings that we support, but essentially anything that can be found using regular expression in an invite, we can then match. So that means that I'm a Teams focused organization, but someone external might send me a Cisco WebEx meeting. Users typically don't understand how to join that from an endpoint, so you can just forward that meeting request to the room resource, and then we'll take care of placing the join button on the screen. Very, very popular. Now, what I mentioned before about trusted devices, so devices that are registered to PEXIP or even registered to their existing Cisco or Poly call control, we have the ability to deem them as trusted. So if it's part of your organization, allow these endpoints to come into our service or via the self-hosted solution and plop them straight into the meeting without having to open up Teams and allow that participant to join. Now, you might communicate with external organizations as well, so they have the ability to dial through the cloud video interrupt, but you don't want them to just automatically join your meetings. So typically an organization has a policy that that only trusts internal devices. So for external connectivity, we honor the same policy as you would for normal Teams meetings, where there's a two-stage connection. So they have to be admitted into the call. Now, our platform, we also allow device registration. So we have a subscription service where if someone wants to remove all the call control within an organization to reduce cost, we can then take the registration off the on-premise call control and have our service handle that. By virtue of doing that, they're deemed as trusted devices. So we take care of the firewall, traversal, the phone books, everything else, and allow these calls to dial in. It also means that they register as the same domain as what you saw in the invite. So users, if they forget to book a meeting room, they can just walk up to the room, dial the 12 or 13 digit conference ID, hit join, and they're into the meeting. Very, very simple. So what happens once you're in a meeting? What does it look like? Well, on the video conferencing side, we try and present the video layout that's common across a lot of video conferencing bridging platforms. So that's a large box with the active speaker, and then small images below that show the previous speakers. While on the Teams side, users don't really know or can't typically see a difference in terms of whether a user is on a VTC device or using a native Teams client. Now, in order to keep that experience natural and the same, we support sharing of content in both directions, just like I'm doing now. You can share from your screen or your application from Teams. And on the VTC side, we send a second stream for that content So you'll see on one screen the people, and the second screen you'll see the content. That's exactly what a VTC user is sort of expects. Likewise, when you present from the VTC side, plug your HDMI in or do your wireless sharing, whatever they're capable of doing, then we receive that second stream and send that as a second stream into the Teams meeting. So native user experience is sort of what we strive to achieve there. Now let's talk a bit more about the complexity. I guess is the crux of this presentation, is that a lot of organizations have a lot of things on their network, particularly when it comes to video conferencing. You've got video call control, you've got PBXs to integrate with, complex dial plans, video bridges, firewall traversal technology, and a lot of those things are all sort of tightly integrated together to bring forward a minimal viable video conferencing platform. So typically a profile of a customer would look like this. They have Skype for Business online or as shown here on premise, but they have a vision to move to Microsoft Teams. Their video side of things, they've got their call control, firewall traversal, bridges, a whole bunch of endpoints in order to facilitate point-to-point and multi-point calling. Now, customers moving to Microsoft Teams, and typically you don't just switch everything off and move everything straight away. It's normally a project to ease the transition across. So as it stands today, there is no interoperability directly between these platforms. Yes, there's a little bit of Skype for Business interop with Teams, chat, and so forth, but in terms of content in both directions, it's a bit leaves a bit to be desired there. So where we come in, and I'm focusing here on the self-hosted version initially, the PEXIP Infinity, is to deploy some of these workloads within the environment. So we have a management VM, and we have an edge VM that handles the firewall traversal, and then the PEXIP conference nodes there on the right hand side to handle the chunky media encoding and decoding. Now, as part of the certification for providing interop into Microsoft Teams, we must deploy a workload in Microsoft Azure, and on the left there you'll see that we have some Teams connectors. They sit behind a load balancer and scale set, and that's what's responsible for the actual communications into Microsoft Teams tenancies. So by virtue of just adding those bits within the network, we provide the interop capability. So we typically have a trusted application from your Skype front end pulls into the conference nodes, and your call control, whether it's Call Manager or Cisco VCS or Polycom DMA, a SIP trunk to our conference nodes, and that will facilitate the interop out through the Teams connectors into the Microsoft Teams tenancy. And so that's basically what the on-premises high-level topology looks like. Now, as customers sort of migrate from Skype for Business into full Microsoft Teams, and we start pulling away those layers, so we make it a lot less complex. So Skype for Business goes away. Potentially, the on-premise call control for video conferencing goes away, and we're left with just the PEXIP infrastructure to provide the exact same experience on the video side, as well as the interop into Microsoft Teams. So that's at a very high level what our on-premises solution provides. Now, it does obviously mean that there's some work to be done on the customer's network, or within their data centers, for example, or in their clouds. So some organizations prefer to adopt CVI as a service. So that's something else that we do. Our second go-to-market is to remove the requirement for anything to be installed on premise for calling, and all those components you saw earlier are hosted by us, PEXIP, in Microsoft Azure, in various POPs around the world. So the endpoints then can register optionally to the service, and that will allow CVI between customer endpoints and external entities or external endpoints as well. So where are these cloudy things? Well, they're in lots of places. So we have 13 POPs that are interconnected by a low latency, high quality MPLS network around the world. We have Azure workloads in West Europe, in the Netherlands, in Singapore, Southeast Asia, in Sydney, in Australia East, and Virginia or US East. So we try and cover the globe from a Azure workload perspective, but any of these red dots, the 13 POPs, is the entry point for customers hopping onto our network. So the idea is to keep the media as close as possible to the pane of glass and the cameras, so that the chances of poorer quality calls is reduced, because we're not sort of hooking or hairpinning all the way around the world to provide this functionality. And this is all automatic. Obviously, we have active everywhere, and redundancy and failover and elastic growth based on volumes. So during the COVID period, our usage charts, if you look at our analytics portals, just went from quite relatively flat into a massive spike, and it's continued to do that for the last sort of three months. So very popular. We are able to do a proof of concept really quickly on this service, because we're not physically installing anything within the customer's environment, and we can stand up a proof of concept within an hour or so. So happy to talk to anyone willing to or wishing to try it out. Now, in terms of what you get with the subscription, so we have a thing called the Enterprise Room Connector, which really is a bundle of a whole bunch of functionality. So you get to register your devices to the platform if you wish. Excuse me. And you get the Teams interop as part of that subscription. And should the customer wish to implement One Touch Join, which is the calendaring of the endpoints, that's included as well. Excuse me. A little bit more about the subscription. This has proved quite popular for organizations who now have a cloud-first philosophy, where they decommission their existing call control on their on-premise environments. They can register the endpoints to our service. They register to the closest POP to them, or wherever the endpoints are, and that's true of a global organization as well. So if an organization has a presence in the US and Europe and Australia, then the endpoints in those regions will route to our closest POPs to those customers. Once they're on the network calling each other, they traverse our global MPLS network and pop out at the region where the destination is. So it's a very cost-effective method for global organizations to communicate across the world. We can do away with the firewall traversal technology for the endpoints, because it's built into our registration process. We push out phone books to the endpoints, typically for point-to-point dialing, and there's a whole bunch of different methods to connect, including QR code access, where you have an app that you click on your Teams meeting in the app, and then you you show your phone to a QR code, and then the endpoint just begins ringing and is connected to the Teams meeting. Very useful. So actually making it work. When you have an endpoint subscription, the customer will get an email. They click on the activate button, then that opens up a page where you're given the opportunity to launch our activation software, which is designed to make it very simple to reconfigure an endpoint in order to register to our platform. So there's an app that we have where you can start a technical test, and what that does is it actually makes some physical calls from within the app to our service to make sure that the firewall rules are allowed and that media can pass through the network perimeter. So it'll give you a report at the end of that test to say whether you're from the subnet where you run this, it can connect to our service. Then you enter the IP address of the endpoint, and we're registered. So that's pretty much me in terms of what we do. I'm just wondering, Cara, if we have any questions that have come up.
No, we don't have any questions in the Q&A.
Okay.
I will go ahead and publish the link now for the breakout room.
Mm-hmm. I think I spoke a little too quickly.
No, I think that's good. All right. Well, I guess with no Q&A, we'll go ahead and end the session. Thank you, Dennis.
No problem. Thank you for assistance.
You are welcome.